The rain had been falling all morning, turning the city streets into a dull gray blur. Inside the towering glass headquarters of Aldrin Enterprises, life moved at its usual frantic pace. Employees rushed through the lobby, some clutching files, others tapping frantically on their phones. The air smelled faintly of expensive perfume and freshly brewed coffee, a scent that never reached the man pushing the mop along the marbled floor. Ethan was used to blending into the background. Dressed in a faded Navy janitor's uniform, he was the kind of man people's eyes skimmed past without recognition. He didn't mind. In fact, it gave him a certain freedom. No one expected much from the janitor, and that suited him just fine. He pushed his mop in quiet rhythm, humming under his breath, the sound lost under the clacking heels and ringing phones. But today wasn't like any other day. From the elevator emerged Celeste Aldrin, CEO of the multi-billion-dollar empire, in a tailored cream suit that looked like it had been designed for royalty. She had that kind of beauty that made people hesitate mid-sentence, sharp, deliberate, untouchable. Her assistant trailed behind, juggling files and a coffee, trying to keep up with her brisk pace. Normally, Celeste would not even glance at Ethan, but today her heels clicked toward him, stopping just a few feet away. "Hey, you," she said, her voice smooth but with an edge that suggested she wasn't in the mood for games. Ethan straightened slowly, resting his mop against the wall. "Yes, ma'am." Her eyes, cold, calculating, studied him. "I need something fixed, right now. My car. It's, well, dead." He frowned slightly. "Dead? It won't start. It's not just the battery. My driver says it's completely shot. It's been in my family since before I could drive. I'm not sending it to a repair shop, I'm not replacing it. I want it resurrected." Her lips curled in a half smirk, as if the idea itself was impossible. "And if I can?" he asked, his tone neutral but curious. She tilted her head, a hint of challenge dancing in her gaze. "If you can bring it back to life," she took a slow step closer, lowering her voice, "I'll let you steal me away for an entire evening. Dinner, drinks, whatever you want." The hallway went quiet in Ethan's mind. He didn't laugh, didn't smirk. He just looked at her as if weighing something invisible in the air between them. "You're serious?" he asked. "I never joke about my time," she replied. Ethan wiped his hands on his uniform, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Where is it?" An hour later, they were standing in the underground parking garage, the sound of rain echoing against the concrete walls. The car sat there like a sleeping beast, a deep blue vintage Aston Martin, sleek curves dulled by dust but still exuding elegance. Even Ethan, who wasn't easily impressed, felt something stir at the sight of it. "It belonged to my father," Celeste said quietly, almost to herself. "He gave it to me when I turned 18. We used to take long drives at night. It's one of the few things in my life that actually feels like mine." Her voice softened in a way Ethan hadn't expected. Beneath the CEO exterior, there was something fragile there, hidden under layers of steel. He walked slowly around the car, running his fingers along its surface as if feeling for a pulse. "You said your driver checked it?" "Yes. He said the engine's done. Beyond repair." "Engines don't just die," Ethan said, crouching near the front. "They tell you their story first. You just have to know how to listen." Celeste crossed her arms, leaning against a pillar. "And you can, listen." Ethan didn't answer. Instead, he popped the hood and bent over, disappearing into a world of wires, bolts, and steel. His hands moved with surprising confidence for someone who was supposed to clean floors. There was no hesitation in his touch, every movement was precise, deliberate. Celeste found herself watching him. The way his brows furrowed slightly when concentrating, the way his fingers navigated the machinery like they'd done this 1,000 times before. "How does a janitor know anything about engines?" she asked finally. Without looking up, he replied, "Because I wasn't always a janitor." Something in his tone made her pause. For the next 30 minutes, he worked in silence. The only sounds were the metallic clicks of tools and the distant hum of the city above. Celeste checked her watch twice, her impatience beginning to grow. "You realize this could be a waste of time," she said, her voice cool again. Ethan finally looked at her, and there was a quiet fire in his eyes. "You asked me to resurrect it. You're just going to have to trust me." She didn't reply. Another 15 minutes passed before Ethan straightened up, wiping his hands with a rag. He gave the hood a firm tap, as if sealing the deal. "Try it," he said. Celeste slid into the driver's seat, skeptical. She turned the key. The engine coughed once, then again, and then, like a deep breath after a long sleep, it roared to life. The sound filled the garage, smooth and powerful, echoing off the concrete walls. Celeste's eyes widened, and for the first time all day, a genuine smile tugged at her lips. She stepped out slowly, still in disbelief. "How did you?" "Like I said," Ethan replied, "you just have to listen." She studied him for a long moment, her usual guarded expression melting slightly. "I owe you a night out, then." "Not yet," Ethan said, leaning casually against the car. "You owe me the truth first. Why does this car matter so much to you?" Her gaze flickered, hesitation, then something softer. "Because, when my father died, this was all I had left that still smelled like him. His cologne, the leather he chose, the fingerprints he left on the steering wheel. I thought, if I lost this too, I'd lose the last piece of him." Ethan nodded slowly, his voice gentle. "Some things are worth saving, even if it takes more than one try." They stood there in the dim garage, the rain still tapping above them, the air thick with something unspoken. Celeste, for all her power and wealth, looked almost human in that moment, just a daughter holding on to the last thread of her father's memory. "Dinner tomorrow night," she said finally, breaking the silence. "I'll send a car for you." "I'll walk," Ethan replied, that quiet fire still in his eyes. She arched a brow. "You're a strange man, Ethan. And you're not as untouchable as you pretend," he said with a faint smile. She didn't respond, but when she turned to leave, there was the slightest hint of amusement on her lips, a flicker of something that hadn't been there before. As the sound of her heels faded into the distance, Ethan leaned back against the Aston Martin, staring at its gleaming hood. He'd brought it back to life, but somehow, he knew this wasn't the only resurrection that was about to happen. Something else had just been set in motion, something far more complicated than fixing an engine. And for the first time in years, he felt like he was exactly where he needed to be. The next morning, the soft light of dawn spilled into the massive glass building of Solara Tech. Eleanor sat in her office with a cup of untouched coffee, staring at the old wristwatch on her desk, the same one the janitor, Daniel, had taken the night before to resurrect. It had been her father's, broken for years, the hands frozen at 317. She had almost forgotten what it felt like to hope for its return. She had told herself it didn't matter. She had given him an impossible challenge just to push him away, to prove that no one could really surprise her anymore. People had tried, failed, and disappointed her far too many times. But something in Daniel's eyes last night, calm, steady, unafraid, had stirred an unease inside her. She hated not knowing whether that unease was anticipation or fear. By 8 o'clock, she was pacing. She told herself it was because she had an investor call soon, but deep down, she was listening for the sound of his footsteps. And then she heard them, slow, deliberate, confident. The door opened, and there he was. Same faded blue uniform, same work boots scuffed from years of labor, but in his hands, was the watch. It was ticking. The rhythmic, soft clicks of the second hand filled the room in a way Eleanor couldn't explain. He walked over and placed it gently on her desk. "I said I'd resurrect it," Daniel murmured, his voice low, almost intimate. Eleanor's breath caught. She reached for the watch, feeling the smooth metal under her fingertips, the faint vibration of life in its mechanism. Her father's watch. Running. How? She started, but the question dissolved on her tongue. Daniel smiled faintly. It wasn't dead, just neglected. All it needed was someone willing to open it up, clean away the years of dust, and give it back its heartbeat. His words hit her harder than she expected. She looked up at him, really looked at him, not just the janitor in the background of her empire, but a man who could take something broken and make it whole again. "Why did you do it?" she asked softly. "You could have walked away. No one would have blamed you." He shrugged. "Because you asked me to. And because sometimes, people hide behind impossible requests when what they really want is to see if anyone cares enough to try." Her throat tightened. That was far too close to the truth. She had thrown him that challenge like a shield, never expecting it to be met. But he had met it, not with money, not with power, but with time and care. "Do you always fix broken things?" she asked, trying to keep her voice light. His gaze didn't waver, only when they're worth it. The silence between them was heavy, charged. Eleanor looked back at the watch, running perfectly in her palm, and she realized she was dangerously close to honoring her own words from the night before, her impulsive promise that if he could resurrect it, she would let him steal her away. "You know what I said last night," she said slowly. "I remember," Daniel replied, his lips curving slightly. I also remember you didn't think I'd succeed. Her pulse quickened. And what if I keep my word? Then I'd say, Daniel said, leaning slightly closer, you might find that leaving this glass tower for a little while wouldn't be the worst thing that's ever happened to you. It was reckless. It was absurd. She was the CEO of one of the fastest growing tech companies in the country, and he was, the janitor. A man with calloused hands and quiet eyes who shouldn't have been able to shake her world this way. But she found herself saying, all right, show me. He didn't take her to some expensive restaurant or sweeping penthouse. Instead, he led her out of the building, through the morning streets still waking from sleep, to a small, tucked-away workshop that smelled faintly of oil and wood shavings. This is where I fix things, he said simply. There were clocks on every wall, grandfather clocks, cuckoo clocks, pocket watches, all ticking in different rhythms. It was a chorus of time. In the center of the room was a workbench covered in tiny screwdrivers, gears, and polishing cloths. It's beautiful, Eleanor admitted, running her fingers along the edge of an old mahogany clock. My father taught me, Daniel said quietly. He used to say time is the only thing you can't buy more of, so you'd better take care of it. When he passed, I kept this place going. Not for money, for him. Eleanor felt a strange ache in her chest. And you work as a janitor because... He glanced at her. Because it keeps me close to the kind of people who've forgotten what time is worth. Sometimes, I like reminding them. She thought of her own life, meetings, deadlines, constant pressure to grow, expand, achieve. She had built an empire but had no idea when she had last truly lived. Daniel watched her as if he could see the thoughts moving behind her eyes. When was the last time you did something just because you wanted to, not because it looked good on paper? She couldn't answer. That day stretched into hours. He showed her how to clean the inner workings of a clock, how to adjust the balance wheel, how to listen, not just hear, but listen, to the beat of time. She found herself laughing at his dry humor, leaning in closer without realizing it. By evening, they sat outside the workshop, the sun setting in a blaze of orange and gold. Eleanor looked at him, and for the first time in years, she felt a peace she didn't have to buy. You stole me away, she said softly. Daniel chuckled. You let me. When he walked her back to her car, she knew she would see him again. She didn't know what this was, where it could go, or how it would fit into the carefully constructed world she had built. But for once, she wasn't thinking about the future or the risks. She was thinking about the sound of a ticking watch, and a man who had taught her that some things aren't lost, they're just waiting for someone to bring them back to life.